there's power in this, and that
Yes.
there's more to be had to this Christian journey than just a Sunday appearance and going home for the rest of the week. Um, Use me as a vessel. Let your Holy Spirit pour through me. Let these people know that these words are not mine. It's just a testament that you've given me on this earth. In your name, amen. The reason I'm here is because I've spent 2 months in a crazy place in Philadelphia. It's called Kensington, and it's like nothing you've ever seen before. It's like the biggest comedy show and biggest tragedy all piled up into one block. I watched a YouTube video about 2 years ago, just randomly just stumbled upon it. And it was this guy interviewing this bald pastor with a really strong Philadelphia accent that, you know, talks like they call him a Kenzo, because that place is called Kensington in Philadelphia, they call him Kenzo. He talks like a Kenzo. He's got a real rough East Coast personality. And I was like, this guy's a character, and he believes in the Lord very much so, and he's got a very interesting testimony and a very interesting ministry. But at that point, I didn't necessarily feel called out to go to Kensington or anything like that. And I would say it's more important for me at this point to rewind. I'll rewind my testimony back to when I was a kid, because I think that's important to start off how I even got to where I got. So obviously I've grown up with my mom and dad. I'm sure you guys know them. If you've been sitting in this room with them, you know they have been in ministry their whole life, and my dad's a pastor and my mom's a worship leader, and their main purpose in life has always been to just give people what they've experienced, especially after my sister passing away, especially give people the Lord in his fullest and really offer that hope to people, and basically what people are missing in their lives. They feel they have that, and I know they have that out in their lives. But as a kid, for me, I could have cared less. Growing up in that house, I have always believed in God and believed in Jesus, but as far as the church went, I could have cared less about the church. I've always seen shortcomings of the church and probably picked it apart more than I should have. But you grow up in a ministry household and you see all this stuff, and that's kind of what happens. You're in a place, a church, which is governed by people, and pieces fall apart. And me as a young kid, and I'm, you know, if you ask my parents, I'm pretty logical. I looked at that and I said, well, what is that? That's not God. That's just people playing this little chess game inside of a church. And they're all, you know, acting like politicians, and that's what it seemed like to me. It just seemed like this big political party to make this a Sunday, and then everybody goes home for the next 6 days. And there's nothing. As a young kid, I disregarded that, and I fought with my parents to go to church a lot, and I was very rebellious as far as trying them to get me to come into this environment. I could have cared less about it. So if you're not going to make your friends in church, you're going to make your friends elsewhere. So I made my friends in school and through sports, and that is where a lot of sin was released into my life that I still would have to deal with today, which I would have never known. But you know, you go through your kindergarten to 4th or 5th grade years, and you're just kind of a kid. You don't really know what's going on. Maybe you do. Maybe that's a cop out. But to me, it seemed like I was just a kid. I didn't really know a whole lot. But then you start to get to that age where you're 11, 12, 13, 14. And I was very aware that I was doing things that were not probably pleasing to God, or even pleasing just to my parents. And with that, it would be like being introduced to porn as a young kid, or just being introduced to sexual immorality with women as a young kid. And those are things that, like, they don't seem like a big sin when you're that young, but they latched into my life, and they're things you have to deal with for the rest of your life, and it's not what the Lord would want for you. But those are things that just took a viper bite into me, and they don't let go. And so I had to deal with that stuff growing up, and I didn't really care that I was sinning. But more so now, when I look back on it in retrospect, and have a different perspective on it. I'm like, man, how many kids are going through this now? How many kids are in the same situation? Because, for any of you that got grandkids or kids or whatever, if you think they're not, they are. I promise you, it's happening. And so yeah, I get introduced to that stuff at a very early age, and still, like, I'm leading this life of sin, but I don't really care, and there's no reason for me to change, it seems like. And then in ninth grade, my sister gets cancer, and I'm sure you guys know the story, but I'll tell it from a different perspective, from my perspective, because my perspective of that whole journey is much different than theirs. And so, her getting sick, I think I was 15, and it was devastating for me. Like, that was a very hard thing for me to even wrap my head around as a 15-year-old man. What does it mean that my sister's got cancer? I think at first everybody kind of thought that, like, this will just blow over. The doctors kind of make it seem out to be like, we'll just do the chemo and all this stuff, and we'll just kick it to the curb and you'll be good in a couple months. But it wasn't like that. And so I was in ninth grade when she got sick, and I was still minimally living a life of sin, if that's what you call it. Like, I wasn't crazy yet. I wasn't going fully crazy. But once I think I was in Cedar Falls, the way I'd say it is, I didn't have to do that. I knew they were always there for me, but it was just what I did, and didn't have the time and energy to come always there for me, but it was just what I did, and didn't have the time and energy to come. And I don't fault them for that. They had to deal with my sister. She's sick. They had to deal with, that's just what it was. They just had to deal with her. And to an extent, I knew that. And so I knew that I can go out and do whatever I want. I can go out and get drunk. I can go out and just do my thing. And I did for a while. And it definitely, it caused a lot of chaos in my life, and it caused a lot of bad, I think, maybe relational issues with my parents at the time. And so you move forward from that, and I get to probably my junior year of high school, or I guess my senior year of high school, and I hadn't been going to school. I was getting kicked out of classrooms by teachers because I was arguing with them, because why not? That was just my mindset. I was like, you know what, I can piss this teacher off, I can make her mad, I'm just gonna make her kick me out of class because it's just something to do. I'll get a rise out of it. And it's true. I mean, that's how my personality's always been. That's the person I am. I'm just like that. I don't know why, but it's some of the Lord's, maybe, I don't know what to say about that, but that's just who I am. And so that stuff was happening, and my dad didn't, I think, my mom had blocked the principal's phone number or something on my dad's phone, because if he would have known all the stuff that was going on at school, I don't think I would have been in the same shape I am now. I probably would have had a couple more belt marks on my back, but yeah, so you get calls from the principals all the time and the guidance counselor, and they're very gracious with me, and they gave me a lot of leeway because they knew the situation that was going on at home. But it came to a point where, like I said, it was my senior year, and they're like, all right, like, you're failing every class. You were kicking you out of school, or you're going to an alternative school, and you're going to graduate there. And so I went to the alternative school route. I showed up and still played the system there tons of times. I remember there was something before Christmas break where there was something to that school where if you didn't show up 1 or 2 times, they would kick you out for 2 weeks. And I had got my classwork to the point where I literally had like 1 or 2 days left to graduate, but I knew that Christmas break was coming up, and I got a 2-week break if I got kicked out of school. So I just didn't show up, got kicked out for 2 weeks, plus Christmas break, and then came back and finished in 1 or 2 days. Like, that's just the dumb stuff my mind thinks of to try and work its way around the system. And so I ended up doing that. I graduate, and still, throughout the midst of all this, I'm still miserable. Like, I'm still just living a very sinful life, and have no hope really. And, my sister had passed away at this point a couple months prior, and I'm lost. I have no direction. I graduate from here. I can't remember. I wanted to go like work at Tyson or something and do some program there to work on machines. I don't know. It was just how could I get some money on beer change so I can go out to the bar and have a good time with my friends? That was my thought process. And so I go through that kind of phase of being lost, and then I think something clicked into my head where I wanted to be more maybe mature, or just like I was like, all right, you can't just live aimlessly in life. You got to pick something and go do something. So I decided I was going to go to college and be a business major and yada yada yada. It was just, but these weren't like decisions that were led by the Lord. It was just me just deciding I'm going to go do this stuff. And I do it, and I think towards the end of my freshman year of school, which I was doing online, I started to have really bad anxiety episodes, and there was a point for a week where I remember I couldn't get out of bed, and they would sit with me. And it seems like throughout my life, because I'm so stubborn and don't listen, and yeah, that's my personality. I'm stubborn, I don't listen, and I got to get punched in the face before I'll even open an ear to you. And that's how the Lord broke me, because if you ever like experienced something like anxiety or real anxiety where you can't get out of your bed and can't like do anything, that's how the Lord broke me. And so I'm there. I found the Lord there. My parents would speak into me, and I'd be like, okay, there's something to this. Like, I'm getting peace from what you're saying. I'm getting peace from reading the Bible. I'm getting peace from hearing this word. But at the same time, I'm like, not going to a church, don't care about that whole situation. And so I think the Lord, had done a work there. He kind of brought me out of that season. And at this point, I'm probably 19 going on 20. And still, it's like this common case where like I experienced the Lord's peace. I experienced this situation. Like, he brought me out of this season. And then I was like, I'm going to go back to doing what I was doing. So I do that, go back to doing what I was doing, live the old way of life. And again, it just doesn't work out. Like, I'm just miserable. I have no peace in my life. I get that anxiety back. I get that depression back. And I think that's a common theme throughout, like, if you look at youth throughout all society, and I don't know if this is just because they didn't track stats as much as they do now, or as much as they did back in the day, but the rates of anxiety and depression and suicide and all this stuff is skyrocketed as opposed to older generations. And I don't know if that's a fault of the church not engaging with enough young people or having something to offer that's fruitful and speaking into people's lives. That's probably also a byproduct of social media and all this stuff. But we live in this age where this place right here needs to be something that's offering something to someone like me who is in a bad situation. Because I'm telling you, like, when I'm in this town, for me, the only thing that I ever saw to do was go to the bar and get drunk. Like, that's just what you do. There is no other option. What else do you do here? It's boring. It's Iowa. There's, there you go fish, you go drink a couple beers with your boys, and still, like, that's just how it is. And still, like, that stuff's still in my head. Like, man, I'd love to do that, but now I guess I'm probably skipping over a couple of things, but like I said, I watched that video. And then I didn't feel called out to go into Philly whatsoever after I watched it. I just saw it and I was like, I can't believe this place exists in America. I can't believe the same country that I live in, I can have this peaceful, calm little Cedar Falls, Waterloo, Iowa. And, I say Waterloo because Kensington makes Waterloo look like a joke. You think Waterloo is this bad crime-filled place, and then you're like, man, Waterloo's pretty safe. Nothing's going to happen to you here. And yeah, I didn't feel called out there, and so I was trying to figure out, throughout this process, somehow I decided I'm going to go to medical school and try to be a doctor too. That's kind of probably a lot of skipping over as well, but I'm towards the end of that now. I'm in my senior year of college. I'm about to graduate, and I apply to medical school, Lord willing, in May of next year. And so I say that because this summer we're in right now, I was trying to figure out what I'm going to do, because to get into medical school you need all these things. You need, volunteering and research and yada yada yada. Just there's a million different boxes you have to check to be able to be a good applicant. And I didn't want to just check boxes. I wanted to do something that meant something to me, so that way when it came time to interview with people, I'd have something real to share with them, instead of just like I checked a box and did it. So I was either going to do research this summer, or I was gonna, I got this little thing in my head that said, why don't you go out to Kensington, Philadelphia? And that was the Holy Spirit telling me to go out there. So I fill out that little resume for the Rock, is what the place that I stayed at, it's what it's called, in Kensington. I filled that out, and I kind of put it on the back burner. I just didn't even think about it. And so I sat down to start filling out all these research applications for medical school, and I had probably 20 schools, a 20 school or program list that I wanted to do for this summer. And these things would they pay you money to go live in cool places and all this stuff. And I sit down to fill this application out, and I probably write down, like, I don't know, 4 paragraphs for it. And next thing you know, I get a call from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and they're like, hey, we read your application. We'd love to have you come out to the Rock this summer and volunteer. And I'm like, well, I closed my laptop right at that time. It's just, I don't believe in coincidences like that. I'm filling out all this stuff to go try and go elsewhere. Next thing you know, I get this call to go out to Philly. And I'm like, all right, I'm like, shut my laptop and we're done with that. And so yeah, now that takes me to 2 months ago, and I think I left on May 21st. So May 21st, I left from CF to go to Philly, and I literally had, this terrified my mom, but I had no clue who was picking me up from the airport. I had no clue where I was staying. I didn't really know anybody's names at the place I was staying. I didn't know anything. I literally had zero clue. And I like it that way. I don't think she does, but I like the adventure. I like figuring stuff out and just, not knowing what's going on and putting it together. And I get there, and right away it was pretty cool, because there was 2 younger people that picked me up, and I was surprised to see 2, maybe 19 to 25-year-old people picking me up at the airport. I was like, all right, you guys are staying at the Rock, and I thought I was honestly going to be the only person there, but this is interesting. And so you get there, and it's definitely Kensington Avenue is the street name, but the broader area they just call Kensington. It's not, I don't necessarily really think it's a city or a sub-district of Philly, but that's just what they call it. And you get there, and you turn onto this avenue, which is where the majority of all this stuff is happening, and it's literally, it's an open air drug market. So you can sell drugs, and you can do drugs without consequences. There's nothing, the cops aren't going to stop you from doing it. The only rule there that I figured out pretty much is don't kill each other. That's the only thing the cops are going to enforce. Aside from that, you can do whatever you want. And so you get there and you drive down this road, and it's like, man, this is crazy. Like, these people are smoking crack in front of you, shooting up whatever they're shooting up in front of you. I don't know if you've ever seen people like on fentanyl or tranquilizer, but they have this weird bend where they just sit like this for hours. And I don't know what it is, but they just sit like that in the streets. And so that's a very odd experience to see people have chosen this path for their lives, and this is what they want to do with their time on this earth. And then, you get to the Rock, and it's this very different place. It's this place that's filled with lots of peace and lots of just hope, in a place that is, you're basically on hell on earth. Like, you can't, well, lots of people would say there is, if Jesus were to come back at in human form like he did 2,000 years ago, he'd pick Kensington to go to, because it's a nasty, dirty area, and it wouldn't make sense to be there, for this righteous king to be in this place. But But yeah, it's a dark place and it's very heavy and there's lots of messed up stuff going on. But like I said, inside the rock, there's peace and there's just a hope, and people know that in the community. So much so that, if you were from the rock and you were walking around the streets, the drug dealers wouldn't give you a hard time, or just people in general really wouldn't give you a hard time because they knew what this place was about. Everybody, even the drug dealers there, obviously they saw what was going on there. They knew it was messed up, and they knew that if you're trying to help this place, like, they weren't really giving you a hard time. As long as you weren't snitching on them, they weren't going to bother you. And so I think at first I was kind of maybe not homesick, but just in such a new environment that I was like, I wanted to come back to Cedar Falls. I was like, man, what the heck is going on here? Like, this is not where I'm from. There's millions of people in this city. There's all sorts of different things going on. There's drug addicts outside my window. There's gunshots all the time. There's people getting killed. I think the first day I got there, there was the story going around. There's always a story going around in this place. The story going around in the rock was that someone had got chopped up, their body had gotten chopped up, put into a suitcase, and put into an alleyway right down the way. That's like the first thing I arrived to, and I'm like, what the heck is this place? Like, this kind of stuff doesn't really happen. And so yeah, it's like I have no community yet there, and I just don't, I'm just alone in this random place. But as the days move on, and I get to meet people and introduce to people, I realized there was a community of people there that were, not who you'd think you'd become peers with. Most of these people are ex-prisoners or drug addicts or, you name it. They've been in and out of the system. But they're in the rock now and they're saved and they have crazy stories. And I built this community with lots of people who were, like I said, people I wouldn't expect to be aligned with, but there was an amazing sense of camaraderie that I it's interesting. I go back to say how I just said whatever with the church I get to this point where I get into this church and I'm like, man, this is what I've been missing out on. But it's different than what I think the American church tries to portray as what we should be doing. It wasn't this show that we put on Sundays with the worship thing and an inspirational message. It was the real deal. Like, these people had nothing to hide from you. They weren't afraid to tell you that I was hooked on crack for 15 years out in the streets. They weren't afraid to tell you that I was in this gang, for this much of my life. They weren't afraid. They were just an open book. And the reason they were an open book is because they could go from what they had been to what they are now through being saved. And so that was the real deal. I don't have time in my life for people that are fake and not genuine. And that kind of stuff really turns me off. And when I got to see, okay, there's some, like, not only have I felt the peace of the Bible and of the Lord's word, but now I'm getting to see people really live it out. Like, these people aren't lying. These people are, they're the real deal. And I started to build that community with these people and really see the hope and the change and just what the Lord is doing through people in this very dark area. And I'll be honest with you, I never saw someone get saved. We used to go evangelize on the streets and try and help out homeless people. And not only that, but in that type of area, you also have to understand that there's physical needs to be met before, the Lord can do his work through whatever situation. But we really tried to get people off the streets. We could get people off in 5 minutes. We could get people off the streets in 5 minutes. It took 5 minutes. We could call up an ambulance and get you out of there to a rehab in 5 minutes. And every single time every single time you told that to somebody, their answer would always be not today. And it's a very interesting thing to see, because what these drugs do to people, the tranq and the fentanyl, it literally eats away at their skin. You can see their flesh and bones because it cuts off oxygen supply to their skin, the drugs do, and it literally eats your tissue away. And there's these people standing in front of me, and I'm telling them I have a golden ticket to get you out of here. You can go and get away, and they say not today, with their syringe and crack pipe in their hand and their flesh being eaten off their arms and face. And so that's a very interesting sight to see that's the reality of, like, what sin is. And that's the same chain holds that I have felt in my life as far as things that I've got myself involved in. That's that to just an extreme in the physical. And so I think that place really opened up my eyes to, like, that's what sin is. That's seriously what sin is doing to people, and you don't realize it because, you know, it's very easy to hide it in lots of situations. Like back here, people have money, they can, you know, do their thing, and then they have money to hide their sin, which is, like, for me, the thing I've always seen here is alcoholism is very much a thing in Iowa. Everybody likes to drink a lot, and, you know, I've been around that crowd enough to realize that lots of people they're boozers. Lots of people are boozers, but it's a lot easier to say these people are well off because they have lots of money and they're boozers, as opposed to these people on the streets who have nothing and are drug addicts. But my conclusion I made from that is there's no difference between this person beat up on the street with the flesh being rotted away or the person with a ton of money who's living this life of sin, because it's just all sin at the end of the day, and it's an unsafe person. And so that was a weird distinction to make as well. It's like, wow, this is no different. Like, these are just people who are unsaved. And you know, like I was saying, I didn't really necessarily see anybody personally get saved, and they get to see lots of people come out and go to rehab. But during my 2-month stay, it was dry. Like, I didn't really get to see that happen. But what I did get to see is inside the church, you can walk up to 100 different people who will tell you, I've been on the streets, I was that person, I'm now not, I've been saved. So that was my hope. And, you know, that life that, you know, there's really only a group of 4 or 5 people that do the evangelism there on the streets. It's tough. Like, you got to be called to doing that. Even for me, I was like, man, I don't know about this. This is a crazy life, because it's very heartbreaking and you don't see a lot of change lots of times. But there is hope, because you do look inside the walls and you do see people who have experienced a change in their life, from literally being strung out on the side of Kensington Avenue to now being a completely different person with a life and a house and a car and you name it. And yeah, so that was my big takeaway from that place, was that the pastors, the reason there is a change going on in people's lives is because there's no, like I said, there's no fakeness about it. There's no being disingenuous about it. They preach the word, and they preach the word in its wholeness, and they pray. And there's not this big complex equation the church doesn't need to be this big complex thing. The Lord has, I think, made it very simple to reach people, and it's preach his word, but do it diligently and do it in a way that is you're not veering off and trying to pertain to what people want. Because, you know, I heard a quote back when I was there that the Bible shouldn't cater towards how you feel. You should be changing based on what the Bible says. So the Bible doesn't fit you. You should fit the Bible. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I saw there. I saw that they didn't veer away from teaching hard topics and saying hard things. And part of this is just because there's an East Coast attitude there. Mm-hmm. They're not afraid to tell you how it is, and they'll say it straight up. And they do it in love. You got to do it in love. You can't be a jerk. But at the same time, there's things that need to be said to people that would be beneficial to people, and things that need to be said in the church that people need to hear. Because I think the main problem for at least my generation of the church is it just seems like there's no power to it. Like, it seems like there's no like no power to it, and like I said, there's not people. It doesn't feel like it's genuine. It just feels like this Sunday expression and worship, and go home 6 days a week and live your life how you want, and then come back on Sunday. Whereas what I saw there, and it is different because these people have nothing else besides the Lord. So it's hard. It really is that verse in the Bible where it's easier for a poor man to get into heaven, because with less you have to rely on the Lord much more, and that becomes your world. And for that, those people are at peace in their life. They still got problems, and they still are going to deal with sin. But there's a different attitude about the Lord and peace about the Lord that I experienced there that I've never experienced anywhere around here. And I think that's a problem. Like, I think that people need to hear what I heard and see what I saw. And like I said, it's hard because we don't live in Philadelphia. We don't live, like, I can't take Cedar Falls and I can't take all these places and pick it up and put it there. And I can't implant what's in my mind into other people's minds as far as literally seeing and experiencing what I did. But I don't think that's how, I think that's just how the Lord used me to be able to see this stuff. But I think the Lord's word can reach anybody. That's kind of the whole point. It's not through what I saw. It's literally just through his word working in this place is what I saw. And so the main takeaway from that place, like I said, was that you had very godly pastors in place there who were seeking the Lord and seeking the Lord first. And aside from that, that was it. That was their formula. Like, we're going to pray about everything. We're going to seek the Lord. We're going to read our Bibles, and we're not going to use our human minds for everything. And there's a time you can't be dumb. You can't be an idiot. You got to use your head. But you seek the Lord first and then use your head. And you seek the Lord first and wait for his guidance. And that's what I saw. These people do it, and they got blessed for it. You know, they were trying to build this parking lot across the street this whole time that I was there. That was probably $1 million parking lot, and I don't know how it got built. I don't know where the money came from, but all I can tell you is The Rock did not pay for it. And I get a text from one of my guys who I was staying with a couple days ago that they're building this parking lot. And we've been praying about that the whole time I was there. You know, they got this giant youth factory that they're putting up. That's a $3 million building, and they've been praying. They took out a loan for that. They have no money for that. They're just doing it because the Lord told them to do it. And my dad tells me he watched their service a week ago, and who was it, the mayor? The governor of Philly gave them $1.2 million grant to help build that. So it's just things like that where they seek the Lord and they're doing all this stuff that they're out. You know, they'll tell you, we don't have money to do this. We're just seeking the Lord, and that's it. And they're being blessed for it because they're pursuing the Lord, and that's what they're doing. That's it. That's all I can say. They're just pursuing the Lord and sticking to that truthfully and faithfully. So my closing remarks, I guess, for everything that I brought back is that prior to me going there, I was very unaware that this was possible and this is what the church was, because I think my parents have told me my whole life that this is what the church is, but I never knew that. I never got to experience what the church really was in its fullness. And the church really wasn't like this. The church, to me, wasn't Sunday there. The church was just the fact that I could walk downstairs and say what's up to somebody at any hour of the day, and there's just a community. There's a community of believers there that it just felt like this place you could go at any time. That's how it was. The doors were always open. People were coming in and out of there, always just hanging out, socializing, going out to lunch, coming in, you know, doing Bible studies, a prayer night there. There's just all these things going on, and it was much more than just people showing up on Sunday. It was just this community. And so for me, that was very, very interesting to see and very inspiring to see that this is what it should be like. And the lives that were changed by it, and the way the Lord worked in this very dark place. And as far as, you know, my thoughts now on, because now I have to come from going to this place to come back to going here. And my thoughts now on that is it's definitely been tough. Like, I come back, and I've been back for like a week, and I'm like, man, you know, I'm studying all the time because I have to take a test for medical school, studying all the time. I have to go back to work. I have to do all this stuff. And I'm like, where's my community at? Like, where's this thing that I just experienced at? So I guess I'll just leave it on that note and say, you know, if you guys have any questions or whatever, but that's kind of where I'm at, and that's what my summer was like, and I guess my whole testimony has been like.